Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
This show is brought to you by Miles Franklin. They've been selling gold and silver for 22 years, and I'm a customer because when you buy, they ship. For more information, go to milesfranklin.com or call them at 800-822-8080. 1490 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. With me now, I have Chris Duane, the Silver Shield, Brother John F., and Sean of the SGT Report. We're doing another roundtable because so much is going on in the world right now. You need to know which way to look, which way to turn, how to secure your wealth, how to protect your family, and how this is all going to shake out. It's really confusing right now. So, gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for coming on and being here to help our audience understand what's going on.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Good to be here.
Great to have you back. I'm glad we had a chance to do this again. So, Sean, in the scheme of the economic crisis, it looks like we've entered another phase of it. Where do you think we are in this global economic meltdown right now?
Well, there's probably a question that's better suited to a General Tillane or Bob Chapman than me, but I think it's the 11th hour, Gary, but it doesn't have to happen this way, It doesn't have to go down this way. The people of the world, the people of the United States, the people of Spain, the people throughout Europe could take a page out of the same playbook that the Icelanders have used and swear off these bankers and, put an end, recriminate this debt, renounce this criminally built debt against the people. We know that Spain is melting down. We know Greece has already melted down, really, essentially. Regardless of what you hear from the mainstream propaganda media. Christine Lagarde from the IMF is trying to get, the 187 members of the European Union to commit to $600 billion to build a global firewall. She's literally has her purse in hand begging for money, and this is the woman that replaced the Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who you guys would remember was set up because he was not necessarily wanting to enslave these nations with austerity, and he was starting to pull in a little bit of a different direction, so he's not in there anymore. They ruined him. They put in Christine Lagarde, and the goal is to enslave these nations. And so I think we're in the 11th hour. When the Eurozone melts down, I'm not sure. It could happen in a week. It could happen, who knows? I think that the United States Treasury, which is really the ultimate backstop for the IMF, the Federal Reserve, I should say, I think they want to let this thing percolate through the November election. The question is, can they? Can they extend and pretend through the November election? I don't know. Others smarter than me have long since predicted a meltdown. It should have happened by now, and it hasn't. So I think we're in the 11th hour, but, Kerry, it doesn't have to happen this way. The people of the world can stand up like the Icelanders did, kick these criminals out of their country, arrest them, prosecute them, disavow the debt, and put an end to all this nonsense, and it could happen tomorrow.
Yeah, amen to that. So, Chris, what's your thinking in terms of the collapse? And Sean raised a lot of valid points that we've kind of brought it on ourselves by complacency, by misplaced respect for the authority of what are really illegal governments and illegal money. Where do you think we are in this whole meltdown?
Yeah, I definitely think I agree with Sean that we're getting every day I wake up and I'm like, is it here? Is it here? And
are we there yet? Can I use the bathroom, Daddy?
but I'll disagree with Sean on one respect. I think it does have to happen this way. I think humanity has to learn such an awful lesson that it can swear off debt and death. I mean, that's what our society is built off of. It's been, enslaving nations with debt, and those that won't go along willingly, they get death. And that's the way that the system works. I've known a lot of alcoholics in my life, and I've never known one to just sober up because they hadn't hit rock bottom. And that's what this country is going to have to go through. We need a really good depression. My grandfather used to say that, 20, 30 years ago, and I'd be like, well, why? And it's because the lessons that are most important are the ones hardest learned. And I really believe that humanity has to go through this in order to reevaluate everything we do. It's not just a dollar; it's our entire existence. Everything we do is touched by, this short-sighted narcissism. This, the idea that we can, get something for nothing. This lottery mentality, and it's been foisted upon humanity by a group that, created, perpetuated, and profits off of it. And I believe that we have to go through this the hard way. There's just no stopping this.
So it's kind of like the kid. When you're a kid, we've all done this. You're in the kitchen and your mother says, don't touch that stove, it's hot. And no kid can resist touching it and getting burned. So we all need to get burned. The system needs to get purged so that we learn the lesson for this generation, because every generation learns this lesson, or every few generations they're forced to relearn it. Nobody ever can act to prevent from everybody getting burned on the stove. John, what's your feelings on this? I mean, I know it's so hard to predict what's going to happen, how the thing's going to shake out, other than it's going to happen. But timing-wise, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, those are interesting perspectives. I actually kind of agree with both. Iceland's sort of a unique situation because everybody came out with torches and surrounded the president's house. So I don't see that sort of thing happening here. But Chris has got a very good point that people need to learn the lesson that the government's not there to take care of everyone. The government takes wealth from one person at gunpoint and gives it to another. So there's really no way that the government can take care of everyone. And unfortunately, in the West, we seem to have adopted that sort of moral philosophy. Now, as far as the collapse goes, I see it more as a Anglo-American empire issue, England, the United States, less so Canada and Australia, and then even less so Central and South America. But I see Asia on the rise, and I think that there ultimately is some type of power struggle between the East and the West going on here as Asia continues to grow and the West continues to shrink and spend and just dig a bigger hole. So I think the trilateral powers, probably Europe and Japan and America, are going to go down together, but I don't know about the rest of them.
Okay, fair enough. And the problem is that the world is so intertwined and we become almost one economy that it's hard for a big chunk of it to go down the tubes and for it not to affect the other parts of the globe, like Australia, like Canada, South America, Africa. It's all connected. So we're going to see how much ingenuity humanity has when we all have to deal with this. But kind of leads to the next question, which I'll direct to Chris. Why do you think precious metal prices have been really stuck in the mud for the last 6-8 months, almost going on a year?
Yeah, well, I mean, quite simply, it's a manipulated market. When silver was rocketing up from its bottom of 2008, I think it was down to $8. And then I think September or August 31st, 2010, JP Morgan closed its proprietary desk. And from that date on, I mean, silver rocketed from $17.76 all the way up to $50 without a heartbeat, and to 2011. I did the video, kind of dissecting Blythe's, interview that she did, where they basically came out and said that they're, that they have no position in the market. And
I believe that one. Yeah, I believe it.
Well, to a certain extent, like the video to me was very scripted. It was on a set. She's very uncomfortable. She's not a convincing actress. And, I think that they are telling a certain amount of truth in that video, saying that, it's not their book. That would be against the Volcker rule. But if they are acting on behalf of their clients, and their clients are the Fed and the Treasury, yeah, and they don't care, and that's why they're making twice as much profit now that they don't have a quote unquote speculative interest in the market. They made twice as much profit because they're reaping fat, commissions off of the Fed and the Treasury's move into the markets.
Yeah, they're winning on every trade, no matter what happens. It was
Absolutely.
like Eddie Murphy in that movie Trading Places, where they're explaining to him how the market works and said, if our client makes money or our client loses money, we get a commission. And he's like, wow, shouldn't that be illegal? There should be a law against that.
But Kerry, what's happened since May 1st is that the criminal elite, the Anglo-American banking empire, they have quadrillions of dollars worth of debt that is built upon this, and they cannot have anybody challenging the threat of the dollar. I mean, we go to war physically with nations over defending the petrodollar. Well, this is economic warfare against the precious metals because they are a competitor to the dollar. And while they can very effectively move the markets for a couple days, they cannot stop the trend. And what we've seen since May 1st is a gigantic consolidation to a 30-year cup and handle. We had silver pop up to $50, 1980. We've had a rocket from the 2008 all the way up to 2011, back up to 50, and now we have this 1-year consolidation. And all this handle is basically all the longs, licking their wounds because they got taken by the shorts, and all the shorts lumping on whenever they can. And all this time period is to see whose will is stronger, who has the ability to stay longer, who has more interest in. And I cannot help but to think that with the explosion of people talking about silver and worrying about the debt crisis and seeing what Greece and Iceland and Spain and euros and seeing how much debt that we have and that even Japan's even worse than us, that somehow the physical market's not the place to be. And the biggest weapon that the Anglo-American empire has is naked short selling and margin calls and all that other stuff. And all it's doing is scaring people out of the markets. I mean, MF Global, to me, was another hit. And it's scaring people out of the physical or out of the paper market. And if they're still, if they were investing in silver in the paper market and see that it's a rigged game and that they don't stand a chance and that the guys like JP Morgan see both sides of the trades, and all their stops and they hold all the cards, and that they grasp onto the idea that owning physical silver deleverages their paper Ponzi scheme and empowers us, at some point, the physical market's going to overtake the paper market, and I think we're getting very, very close to that point happening.
Yeah, it's got to happen at some point. So, John, what are your thoughts about the metals prices, why they've been in this range really for almost a year now?
I agree with Chris. It's a lot of it is the suppression, but they can suppress paper prices. They cannot suppress physical prices. So we've seen in the past various strange bottlenecks. I follow a lot of the mints, Perth Mint, the RCM, and some of the others, and you've seen very strange bottlenecks in the past. It seems that Australia is not exactly thrilled about parting with more silver at these ridiculously low prices. But, if you just look at the numbers pretty much tell the tale. I mean, 50 million ounces, that's roughly the amount of silver that's mined in the United States in a year. What does that come to at current prices? $1.5 billion?
Yeah, not much.
Pocket change. That's the same number as silver eagles that were sold, which, by the way, has tapered off a little bit, but was an incredible record the last year. So it's just, in my mind, it's just a battle for the mind. They're trying to get everyone convinced that silver is no different than copper. It's no different than aluminum or anything else. It's a just-in-time industrial commodity, and that's all it is. But, of course, that's not what it is. It's a monetary metal, and my goal is to try to convince people that as we stack physical silver, we remonetize the metal, and it doesn't take very much of that to win that away from them.
Absolutely. Hey, Sean, what are your thoughts on the stagnant metals prices?
Yeah. Well, just real quickly, I mean, we all know, those of us that are paying attention to this, that Lehman Brothers held the largest silver short position in the world. And when they went down in 2008, J.P. Morgan inherited that position, or willingly took.
Yeah, Bear Stearns.
Right?
I'm
sorry, you're right. Yeah. Bear Stearns. That's what I meant to say. Thanks for correcting me. And J.P. Morgan willingly took that on. And, with Blythe Masters' appearance on CNBC recently, I don't think that there's been a television appearance that has sparked so much interesting writing in the silver community. Ted Butler's written about it, Bill Murphy,
everywhere,
Chris,
right?
Duane, everybody. It sparked a lot of conversation, a lot of writing. And, Tyler Durden over at Zero Hedge wrote something very interesting, and I just want to read part of that to you. He's talking about the fact that now the lawsuits are flying, and Bear Stearns, folks there are claiming that J.P. Morgan abused its access to U.S. government officials and then, quote, accelerated Lehman's free fall into bankruptcy. That's where I got mixed up there, but it's Bear Stearns, Lehman, the whole thing is all tied together. But this article goes on to say, and therein lies the rub, because of all the too-big-to-fail banks, J.P. Morgan is literally at the nexus of the entire $16 trillion shadow banking system, the very system that the Fed uses constantly to hypothecate and rehypothecate assets, in essence, creating money out of nothing. So as long as these criminals remain in charge of our system, this fiat debt-based banking system, silver doesn't stand a chance. And I would disagree, I think, a little bit with Brother John's statement that they can't suppress physical, because that's what they're doing. Gainesville is running a sale right now where you can buy an ounce of a silver maple for $1.98 over spot. And if the paper price reflects current spot price, it's their paper manipulation brings these prices down to $30, $32. That's what they're doing. They're suppressing the physical price through their paper games, and it seems to me that until this system collapses, it'll go on in perpetuity. And
what I'd like to add to that, you have to view this as any other manipulated market. In New York City, for those of you who aren't familiar, we have this thing called rent control. The only other place in the country where this exists is Santa Monica, California, Westchester County, New York, which happens to be where I call home. And what happens in a manipulated market is if you set the prices too low, you have shortage. And if you set the prices too high, you have glut or surplus. So what's happened here is these prices have been set artificially low, going back a generation to the London gold pool. And what happens is market distortion, and as people lose confidence in this fiat, they are going to have runs on this metal, and you won't be able to buy the physical. Chris has made this point over and over again, and there's a guy named Biderman. I don't know if you've ever watched him, but he says that silver is a lousy investment until one day it's going to be the best investment out there. And maybe it's the crash of the euro, maybe it's some black swan, maybe it's a war, something we can't even contemplate, but it's off the horizon, it's coming, and whether it collapses the system, whether the metals prices become the tail literally wagging the dog, something will happen that will set the market straight, because it's too unstable at the present time. And that leads to the next question. The final question is, what is the world going to look like after the final crash? And will totalitarianism, will it prevail? And let me ask you, John, what are your thoughts?
Well, that's a tough one. What the system's going to look like after the final crash. I think it's my guess that the Anglo-American Empire has probably overplayed their hand on this. I think that, a lot of the world views, we've got, as Sean pointed out, Christine Lagarde and these people out there begging for money again from the IMF. But from many parts of the world's perspective, the the IMF, the World Bank, NATO, all these groups are pretty much just U.S.-led groups. They're U.S. puppets. So I don't think that they put a lot of stock in that. Certainly, I don't believe in Asia, which I see on the rise, and as Jimmy Rogers says, a 100-year rise that we're looking at that's happening in Asia. And I'm not so sure that the rest of the world is going to want to allow a corrupt group of people who have pretty much overplayed their hand to continue to control the world. So I expect to see fragmentation and then the power to kind of break down. Possibly the same thing here in the States. We definitely have draconian laws being passed and all kinds of crazy stuff going on, people being groped at the airport. It seems like people are being conditioned to live under a police state. And I think probably the reason why is that we're looking at, in the United States, we're going to be looking at a Greece-type situation where so many of the people work for the government or are dependent on the government that when that plug is finally pulled, they're going to become violent. And the government is preparing for that inevitability.
Sean, what are your thoughts? What's it going to look like? And will totalitarianism become the system? And we're getting closer to it, right?
Yeah, I have an article. It's at the top of SGT Report. I posted it yesterday. It's one that I wrote about a recent interview I listened to with John Wesley Rawls, in which he says that, quote, "We are entering into an age of deception and betrayal by our own government." And it's just a very compelling interview. I would suggest that everybody, check it out. It was an Alex Jones interview with John Wesley Rawls. And, here's the thing. When I said earlier that it doesn't have to go this way, and if humanity only could stand up and throw off these banksters, there might be an easier out for humanity. I agree with Chris. I agree with Brother John that I think, especially in this society, Americans are going to have to go through the ringer before they wake up because they don't cherish liberty. The exception is those who would support Ron Paul, and there's hundreds of thousands of us that do, millions, in fact, I believe, and the mainstream media is not reporting that. But I do think a cleansing needs to happen where there's a rebirth of liberty and people re-embrace those constitutional principles, and it may take a great collapse for people to get there. I get that. But after listening to this interview with John Wesley Rawls, I'm going to go on record right now and tell everybody I'm going to start buying less silver every month, and I'm going to start prepping more. Because John Wesley Rawls talks about this great collapse that is coming, and it cannot be avoided, economically speaking, unless the world bands together and pulls, an Icelandic move on these banksters, which probably isn't going to happen. But he's saying that if the power grid goes down in this country, it would mean that the power brokers have lost control of their own controlled collapse, and it could happen. There's a very fragile power grid in this country. And he said the results could be absolutely catastrophic. A massive die-off situation could result in which literally half of the American population could perish in just one winter. And that really resonated with me because I live in a northern climate. And you know what, you guys? I'm not prepared for that worst-case scenario. I don't have backup heat generation for my home. If the grid goes down, I won't go to a FEMA camp. I will not take my family to a FEMA camp. But if I'm not prepared, and frankly, I'm not right now, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble if the grid goes down. And if the food in the stores is no longer available because the trucks aren't running, we are talking about a collapse scenario which is Armageddon in proportion in terms of the way this could go down. And I don't want to see that. So I really wish that humanity would band together as the Icelanders did and throw off these damn bankers. Let's see these mass arrests happen that I keep hearing about. Let's see these bankers get arrested. Let's see prosecutions. Because it could happen. I don't know if it's going to take the military to help us do it in this country or what, but as Chris likes to say, and I think he's right, there is no one coming to save us. And I wish there were, because this collapse scenario that I've just described is a very real possibility, and I, for one, do not want to see it happen, because at the end of the day, you can't eat silver. And if what John Wesley Rawls is saying comes to pass, we're all going to need a lot more than silver stacks in our closet.
Great point. And, now these preppers are being marginalized and ridiculed on that survival or extreme prepper show on National Geographic because they don't want people to prepare. They don't want them to be ready. They don't want them to have their financial survival plan, which is something you guys know I'm always talking about. And it's a personal and family survival plan as well. So, Chris, in summing up, what's your take on it? Where are we heading?
Well, for years I've been fed this, whole scary campfire story of this new world order and the one world currency and the microchips and all that other stuff. I'm a firm believer that we're not going to have further centralization of power by the power elite. I think that's their dream. That's what they're moving towards. But when this collapse happens, there's going to be a massive decentralization of power. That being said, I think local areas can and will turn into 1984. I've made a point, with my subscribers to say, hey, if you're in any urban area inside the United States, you're in deep doo-doo. I personally moved out of New Jersey. I was in probably the wealthiest town in New Jersey. From my whole business, my family was there, and I saw what was coming in 2008. I thought 2008 was it. I left in May, and October 2008 happened. The car business has never been the same since then. That's what I was in. And I moved my family out here into the cornfields of Ohio. But I'm a firm believer that you're going to see urban areas are going to either be Mad Max. So I think Southern California, Miami, kind of urban areas down south are probably going to be more Mad Max. And then northern urban areas like New York, Chicago, Boston, I can easily see turn into some sort of 1984 police state with guys like Bloomberg and Rahm Emanuel, doling out the corporate, pay welfare cards and having checkpoints everywhere and cameras and everything. And anybody who lives there after massive riots and problems there will be order established in those cities. I have no doubt. But I think the rest of the country is going to get hurt and going to brush off this fairly quickly. I made the example of when Katrina hit New Orleans, that urban population was desperately dependent upon that paradigm existing. They needed the constant influx of power. They needed the constant, welfare cards or, whatever, that sustained that society down there. And when it was gone for a couple days, all hell broke loose. I mean, there was all sorts of travesty that happened down there. Yet when there's natural disasters of even larger proportions in, the middle of the country, with these massive floods that, wipe out whole cities and stuff like that, you don't see the looting and the shooting and the mayhem that goes on there. Those people, it was neighbor helping neighbor and working all hours and all conditions and all hands on deck, old people, young people, kids. And that's the kind of quality of people that you need to start looking at. I mean, if you get cut off in traffic in an area or somebody doesn't give up their seat or doesn't open the door for you, what do you think is going to happen when there's no power, when there's no food, and people become desperate? And yet in the area that I live in, people look like me. They're blue collar. There's a lot of gun owners around here. We have a lot of water and food and stuff like that. And, that's something people need to take care of right now. This isn't something that, you're going to wait up until the last second and then move your family and assets. It's taken me 3 years to settle in here, to get to know my neighbors, to have all my preparations in place and all that other stuff. So people, this is coming. This is a mathematical inevitability. Either the debt's going to become so large that we can't pay it, or the more likely scenario, it's going to become so large that they're going to continue to print money and destroy the currency. And at some point, the system ends. And then it's way too late to start redoing this, and the ramifications of you being on the wrong side on that one day, that's generational. It's not just you. It's going to be you and your kids. There's going to be such a wealth divide, a disparity, that I think generations aren't going to come out of this.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit scary, but it's something that we're all going to have to go through. Better to be prepared for it, ready, and it not be as bad as we're all thinking it certainly has the potential to be. So it's better to be prepared and to over-prepare than to not be prepared or be under-prepared and then it be worse than anything that you could have ever imagined. So, Sean, if we want to find you, where on the internet to learn more about you and SGT Report?
Oh, thanks, Kerry. Thanks for having me. I want to thank Chris and John, too. You guys really inspire me, and you bring out my passion, clearly. I think I've been maybe a little over the top today, but I really enjoy these conversations. Thanks for having me. SGTreport.com is the website, so thank you.
All right. And John, where do we find you?
It's Brother John F. on YouTube or brotherjohnf.com.
Great. And Chris, how about you?
Don't-tread-on.me is the blog, and then my Truth Never Told YouTube channel on YouTube.
And me, I'm Kerry Lutz, and if you want to find out more about what we do, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being on here. I think that these types of roundtables really can get people thinking and getting ready for what could become the inevitable.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks, Kerry.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Hey, a pleasure. Take care, guys.